Philippe, how are you? Thank you so much for bringing me to your favorite bar. And we're in Singapore today.
Gary, we are. Thank you very much for the invitation, and great to have a drink with you in the Long Bar in the Raffles Hotel in Singapore. So it took us a bit to get here, right? But we made it.
It's an extraordinary looking bar, and I've looked at it when I've been in Singapore, but never in it. But it definitely has a colonial feel going on.
It does. It does. Now the Long Bar is indeed it's in the Raffles Hotel in Singapore, which is one of the grand old dames. And what's interesting about this Long Bar is that the story goes that somewhere in the 1800s, a Chinese bartender invented the famous Singapore sling in this bar. And till today, it is very popular. I mean, if you would fly Singapore Airlines, they still serve Singapore sling on board. And it's so popular that tourists queuing up in front of this bar, before this bar, early in the morning to get a Singapore sling. Costs you an arm and a leg, but it's nice. And the bar is very authentic, and it's really cool.
Well,
So nice to have a drink with you.
it's about branding too, isn't it? I mean, I don't know a Singapore sling from a hole in the wall, but I guess it's probably no better or no worse than any other. But it's a reason to go there and to say, probably more in 2023, to take a picture with your Singapore sling and say you were there, is it?
Exactly, exactly. And it's the cocktail is very easy to drink, but Singapore, as you know, has a tropical climate, so it's always 30 plus degrees and very humid outside. So you have one or two Singapore slings, let's say somewhere early afternoon, and you feel totally fine. And then you get outside in the tropics, and then it hits you. So that's the Singapore sling. It's interesting. I could recommend it to you when you're back in Singapore.
I was in Singapore about 3, 4 years ago, just before COVID, and a wonderful lady was trying to teach me how to speak Singlish, which is a sort of a way that everybody seems to communicate when it's not their native language, Chinese, it's not their native. Is it a pidgin? That's what I sort of a.
Yeah, that's what it is. Because Singapore has, in fact, three main groups of population. The majority is Chinese, but they don't speak Mandarin. Most of them are Hokkien Chinese. They migrated years and years ago, generations ago. So it's not proper Mandarin. Then you have a Malay population, Muslims. They speak Malay. And then you have about 10%, they are Indians. So in order to communicate, you speak English. But that English is not proper English, and they call it Singlish. So it has an interesting accent, interesting words thrown in, and you know you need to fine tune your ear, specifically when you chit chat with the taxi drivers. But you'll do well.
But isn't it true about a lot of places, and obviously the different industries we all work in, there's engineers and there's salespeople and there's marketing people, is that it's not until we find the common language that we can communicate with each other, and it doesn't have to be too technical, and it doesn't have to be too marketing. And sometimes we chat, sometimes we find that difficult because we're all trying to be the best speaking English and the best speaking, and is that something that you learn when you go multicultural to multidiscipline companies? Is that sort of all part of the package?
Yeah. No, yeah, I think it's a very fair point. Look, of course, everything starts with communication, right? If you can communicate with each other, you connect, and then you build up, whether it's a business or a relationship, etc. And still back to Singapore, it's very smart what Singapore did. So on the one hand, it's a practical solution with all these different groups of population, but at the same time, it's easy to communicate. So if you and I go to Singapore, we can immediately communicate. If we would go for that matter to other Asian countries, it's much more difficult. So the burden of doing business is away. Hence, Singapore has really become I would say, the center of excellence for business in Asia, and also in Onnec we are expanding there. So it's good.
So we're sitting there, we're having our Singapore slings, and the door opens. Who there, dead or alive, would you love to come over to our company and us to have a sling with? I think
Yeah.
are we? Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, look, it's always a good question. If you can pick anyone in the world, dead or alive, I mean, there's massive amount of choices. And maybe the answer sounds a little bit cheesy, but actually, I would love to have a Singapore sling or a glass of wine or a nice pint of Guinness with my grandpa. And you think, oh, okay, why not? Well, so there's an interesting story to this, because I think my grandpa passed away when he was in his early 80s. I must have been 19 or 20, and I had an okay relationship with him. Nothing super special. I was one of maybe 16 or 17 grandchildren, you know, and in your youth you are there for birthdays and Christmas parties and all that, and that was it. Nothing more, nothing less. Very positive. And only later on, when I did my business studies and when I finished my studies and when I started working, I got more and more admiration for my grandfather, who was a real entrepreneur. He did quite remarkable things. And even at today's standards, you could say he did quite well. And I'm not just talking about, making a lot of money as the measure for doing well. So he was actually a wine merchant. And I'm from the Netherlands, which you can certainly pick up from my accent. So selling wines in the Netherlands was something, I guess, rather elite when that started before the Second World War. So he started doing that. And then when the Second World War broke out, he actually hid his wines in cellars under his house and he cemented them, he closed them. So the Germans that occupied the Netherlands for 5 years in the Second World War couldn't find these wines. So fast forward after the Second World War, he opened the cellars again and he had thousands of bottles of vintage wines from the 1910s and 1920s and 30s. And apparently, from what I heard, there were only 2 or 3 wine merchants in the Netherlands that had that. So he made a great start. And then he moved into what today we would call vertical integration. He decided to use his earnings and buy vineyards in France. At that time, it would take you 3 to 4 days to drive from the Netherlands to France. Today, it will take you about 6 to 7 hours. And my grandma didn't want to be in the car more than 3 days, so they decided on Burgundy, which is slightly closer than Bordeaux. And he bought vineyards in the village of Savigny-les-Bains, in the midst of Burgundy. He kept the vineyard for 25 years, sold them eventually, indeed made very good money, because in those 25 years, Burgundy already became very popular. But he also had a house. They had 7 children as a proper Catholic family. And then during the harvest time, they would go to the village with 4 or 5 of their children, and they would live there for 6, 7 weeks, which was very rare for a Dutch family. So when Grandpa sold the vineyards, the family said, please don't sell the house. So the house is still in the family today since 1952. And well, what he did and how he built his business was just remarkable. So back to the question, I would love to sit with him and say, grandfather, how did you do this? What moved you, to make these investments and to take these crazy risks? And how did you control everything? And so yeah, it would be very nice. So now it's from hearsay, but
isn't it just so wonderful as well? Because I would be with you on that. I would love to meet my grandparents. Because the era that they lived through as well, many of them were from the 30s to the maybe early 2000s. And we talk about innovation and the rapid speed of innovation over the last 10 years. But you talk to your grandfather when it was horse and cart, 3-4 days. And by the time he passed, he could be in New York in 5 hours.
Exactly. Yeah. Different time.
So to remember what the principles were when you were horse and cart setting off on a 6-day journey, and understand that I'm sure there were all sorts of challenges. It's extraordinary. We can learn so much from history and from people who, as you say, I liked what you said, actually. It's not always judged by the financial rewards. It's just some people actually are more innovative the less they have, because they have to be. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And yeah, I even think that a real entrepreneur is not driven by money. Of course, you want to make some money on the side and you want to do well and you can live better probably. But I think it's the urge to achieve something and to do maybe something good and beyond just the monetary rewards. But it depends from person to person.
Well, that's fantastic. So we're in a bar talking about your granddad, who was all about alcohol. This is a great conversation for an Irish dude to have with a Dutch dude. So you're going to be profound now for a moment. You're going to stop the audience and stop the whole. You're going to give us a quote that particularly connects with you, and why.
Yeah, well, also that, I mean, it's not an easy one. You can just pick something, right? And I try to find a quote that I can apply today. And the quote, I translated it from Dutch into English. It basically says, every advantage has its disadvantage. And if I would say it to you in Dutch, to a Dutchman, everyone would know who the quote is from. And the quote is actually from Johan Cruyff. And Johan Cruyff was, if not the best Dutch football player of all times. Later, he became coach of Barcelona. I think he passed away 10 or 12 years ago. And not particularly a hero of mine, but he was a street kid who grew up on the outskirts of Amsterdam, and no education at all, but a very, very sharp mind and very pragmatic and practical. And he had a saying like every advantage has a disadvantage. And I think that's so true, right? Because if you go to today's business, and you and I have to make decisions on daily basis, weekly basis, sometimes it's an important decision, sometimes it's a small one. Should I hire this person? Should we strategically go in this direction? And yeah, you make a judgment call. But it doesn't matter what you choose. Everything you choose will have some disadvantages. So then what I'm trying to do is that if I've made a choice, I'm trying to mobilize the troops, the resources, the focus, the attention into the direction of the choice. And in that way, you basically stimulate, the choice that you have made, and you drive success in that way. But it doesn't mean that if you would have taken another choice, you could have actually done the same, because another choice will also have advantages and again disadvantages. So I just found that just for every day that you can apply it.
But isn't that an interesting analogy between an innovator in soccer? Because he was an innovator. Yeah. That was the thing. People had never seen that reverse twist between the leg thing, innovator. But in terms of what you're saying, I think that there's a term reformers often use about the unintended consequence of a decision.
Yeah, yeah.
That no matter how informed you are in making a decision, be mindful there will be an unintended consequence, which isn't always positive.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying, and I agree fully, is that, but be consistent that you made the decision based on the information you had at that moment in time and the instinct and the team. Because I think as well, people often blame decisions in hindsight. How could they have made that decision and stuff? Whereas if you live by what you're saying, you just adapt. You just continuously adapt. Is that what you're saying? Is that there's no right and wrong answer? There's just the answer, and then you adapt again and again and again.
Yeah, but till a certain extent, Garry, because of course you can do your risk calculations and you have your gut feel and you get inputs from specialists. So I think what you choose should have many more advantages than disadvantages. But you cannot exclude disadvantages, and of course stuff can go wrong or can go in another way. So what's maybe a bit related to this that I also apply in business is scenario thinking. When I talk to colleagues or younger colleagues, and say, I want to move in this direction for my career. So look, it's all very great, but don't bet on one scenario. Try to have two at least, maybe even three, and see how it goes, and that will keep the options open.
Keep the options open, and I wonder, we'll finish off our chat with this, but I'd love to have your insight into what you believe the role luck plays in the journey.
I don't think sheer luck plays a big role. Not sheer luck. I think luck is something that is a name that we give to a situation or something that happens and is very positive. But I think you have to be open to luck, and what is luck for you is maybe not luck for me, and vice versa. I think you have to create situations that stuff can fall in the right direction and something can happen. And if you just don't do anything, you wait. I mean, the doorbell doesn't ring and someone says, "Look, here's $1 million." It just doesn't happen, right?
You're so right, and it's Ryder Cup week, of course, this week. So it would be remiss of us not to have a golf analogy. And isn't it the famous saying by Jack Nicklaus? I think he said, "The more I practice, the luckier I seem to get."
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. I think that's the answer, right? It's a great saying.
Keep putting yourself in the position, and then it's amazing what happens. Listen, it's been wonderful. We've been from Singapore to Burgundy to the Netherlands, back to London, with everything in between in 14 minutes. You're not long with Onnec, but I think already from talking to some of the guys that the whole sense of what Onnec stands for now in a global perspective and finding problems because you've got the solutions. It's I wish you the very best with it. I know you're not there long, but you've got a great team. And thank you for being a Host in Ireland partner.
Yeah, no, fantastic, Gary. Look, I started with Onnec in the meantime 4 months ago. It's a great journey, great company. We're going well, we're expanding. We have great business in Ireland, and I thank you for your time. Great chat. I'll see you again in Dublin for sure. And best of luck.
Or maybe for a sling.
Or maybe for a sling. Yeah. Well, let's stick to the Guinness when we're in Dublin.
Fair point. Fair point.
All right.